Hi, my name is Joe Jackson. I'm a journalist, author, interviewer, and broadcaster who's interviewed roughly 1,400 celebrities over a 30-year period for all major media outlets in Ireland and many abroad. What follows is the third and final part of a series of 3 podcasts based on an interview I did with Neil Diamond roughly 20 years ago in his studio in New York. The interview was done for a radio programme I presented at the time, in which I looked back at the original musical influences in an artist's life, and we then followed that trajectory throughout their career to highlight how, where, and when those influences manifested themselves in their own music. So let's pick up on the conversation with Neil at the point where we were discussing some of his own songs. And by the way, if you want to read articles I wrote based on my 3 interviews with Neil Diamond, check my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com.
It's great to be given airtime for these songs.
Good.
To be moving this way through the career.
Good.
Okay, so we talked Neil Diamond. I talked. I think the only interview I did with you before was over the phone for an Irish paper, and we were talking about the amount of money that you would make on something like "You Don't Bring Me Flowers," and I saw the figure of 37 million, and you're kind of going, you don't need to pay the rent anymore, but you clearly have this driven need to still get out and perform. And I touched on it earlier when I said you need to express yourself, but
that number is absurd.
Is it?
$37 million. No. That's not.
All right.
And you don't think about that. You think about doing something beautiful that people like.
Is that still the motivating factor when you sit down?
Absolutely. You want to please people. You want to please yourself. You want to express yourself beautifully. You want to write something great. You want to show you're worthwhile. I've had a career in music. I've been able to earn a living from music. I want to show people that I'm thankful for that. So you never do think about
Well, there must have come a stage, because I know you did say at the start, and I know you struggled when you at a point you had to raise a family. But then there had to come a point in your career where you say, that's no longer a consideration. I have the cash.
Exactly.
I'm settled now. I have other urges.
But it was that way at the beginning as well. I was, just trying to write good stuff and trying to keep my career going and growing. It's all based on that, and it was always that from the beginning, and it is that way now.
I've talked a lot about, and a lot of your songs that people, you'll do a lot of the early songs in concert. Do you ever feel frustrated that some of the albums, like we're going to talk about the new album, that the new album seems not to hook into the same amount of people, or maybe doesn't get radio support, or does stuff like that? Do you ever feel, here I am, I'm still writing as good as, or different songs, I wish they were as loved or as accepted as the early stuff?
I do feel that way. The radio support is not there, especially since videos came about, which I hate, and I hate doing. I hate the whole filming process. It's not satisfying to me. So
you did a movie, and it was very successful.
I did a movie, and it was successful, but I did it only because it was a way to expose the music.
Right.
Even the title had music in it, the jazz singer,
Right.
It gave me a chance to write music. That's the only reason I did it. If it had no music in it, I wouldn't have been involved.
Okay.
It was a musical movie, and that's what I'm all about. I'll do almost anything to get the music out there and get it to people.
But you hate doing videos?
I hate videos and I hate film. It's a really horrendous process. It's hard work. Being an actor is probably the hardest work there is. It's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. There's no fun involved in it. You're at the behest of the director, who really has all the fun in the filmmaking process. When he says it's right, that's when you're finished.
Right.
If he doesn't say it's right, you keep doing it until he says it's right. And it's no fun.
Were you? I don't know if it's the story about you and Laurence Olivier on the set where you said you couldn't say a particular line, that I don't sing, something to do with making money. I don't sing to make money, and he just told you, it's acting, chap, or something. I don't know what it was, that you didn't feel a particular line in the script would sat right in your mouth.
I asked. He immediately demanded that I call him Larry, which is, a joke. But he's the greatest living actor in the world. And I imposed on him a lot to ask him what I do in this situation. How do I work with this actor in that scene? How do I read this line? What do I do? I was very inexperienced, and he was the greatest of all. And he was a generous man. He told me, he was brutally honest. As a matter of fact, his nickname for me around the film was the Money. That's what he called me. I was the money, which meant that I was the one.
Right.
I was the one who got the film made.
Right.
So
because you were involved, it was backable by whomever.
Exactly.
Right.
And it was a great experience. It taught me to be a better musician. It informed my music. It taught me to be a better songwriter, to be a better performer, to understand how to express myself better. But it was a very difficult process. I was exhausted. I was totally burned out. We had 70 days of shooting. I was in 69 of those days. And on my day off, for some reason, I went down to the set just to see how everybody was doing. But it was very, very hard. I was exhausted. I wanted to quit. I wanted to just pay them off and say, forget about it. I don't want it. But I didn't have the heart to do it. I couldn't explain to my son, Jesse, how I quit. I didn't want to set an example for him that I quit. And so in your life, if something's hard, you can quit too.
All right.
It was a bad example for me to give Jesse, and I stuck with it to a large part because of that. The hours are horrendous. You get up at 4:30 in the morning. You have to study your lines. You have to memorize all this stuff. And I hadn't done memorization since I was in school.
Okay.
And suddenly I'm memorizing pages of dialogue, and I would practice them with Jesse, and he would have them memorized immediately, and here I was, I could just barely memorize the things.
Right, okay.
And I was... and that's very important for an actor. You have to memorize it to the point that you don't even think about it. It becomes part of you, and you just read the line and you express it. So memorization was a very difficult process for me, aside from the process of making films, which is you come in the morning, you block the scene with other people. Wonderful. The lighting director, the director of photography, and the other actors. You block the scene out. This is what works. This is how we're going to do it. And then you go off and you get made up and you get dressed, and then you wait till the lighting guy puts the lamps where he wants them, and the director of photography gets his cameras set up. And I mean, it's a huge endeavor. And then they call you back. They give you 10 minutes notice, and you have to be right on the mark when they call you back. Sometimes they didn't call me back until 4 p.m. when they had the whole thing set up and were ready to do the scene. And I've been sitting around there all day in makeup, in costume, waiting basically for my call. And I had to be on the mark, and so did every other actor. It was an exhausting process. And Olivier, who had done it so often in the past and was the consummate pro, it never troubled him. This was his milieu. And I remember so clearly, first of all, being an actor is like being a laborer. In Hollywood, you have to check in with a card when you come in the morning, whether you're Neil Diamond or Laurence Olivier or some guy who's got 2 words to say. You got a card and you check it in, and it says that's when this actor showed up. It's very much a union kind of a thing. And you check out at the end of the day. You can't leave until you're dismissed by the director. And I would go home and I'd be an empty shell. I was exhausted. I couldn't eat. I couldn't. I was just totally exhausted. Because it was a new process for me. And Olivier would go back to his hotel. He would swim laps. This man was 78 years old. He would swim laps. He would get dressed and go out and have dinner with friends. And I was just barely able to walk up to my room and fall into bed.
Right, okay.
So it was very disheartening.
Okay, I from all this, I imagine you won't be rushing to make a new movie this summer.
Not unless it's got music in it, and not unless it's got a reason.
All right.
Okay. But it's something I'm not chasing.
It's not your milieu.
Absolutely not.
You mentioned Jesse there, and I would like to play another piece of music. And there's another song on your box set which you wrote with Jesse, and you said you don't feel he would have written it without you, or you would have written it without him.
Exactly. He came to me. He's a beautiful guitar player. He's given up music at this point, although he's very musical.
Right.
But I don't think he wanted to grow up in his dad's shadow. He wanted to establish his own identity as a creative person, and he's super creative, and he's had an extraordinary eye for photography since he was a kid, and he's into it very, very
Right.
heavily now. As a matter of fact, he'll be in Dublin shooting the show,
Oh, okay.
and so we did write this song called "Everybody," and it took the two of us to write it. And it's difficult to write with your own kid because they don't treat you like, the icon that you think you are, the living legend that you have in your own mind.
And so they shouldn't.
He would argue with me about lyrics, and we'd get into big fights, and he'd say, "You think that's good? That's terrible." And I'd say, "Just shut up and, do your thing." The arguments were horrendous.
Right.
It was very hard to work with Jesse because he was so brutally honest,
But isn't that a good thing, Neil? Isn't it better that people would say, if more people had said that to you throughout the years, or all songwriters or creative artists, that is crap or that is nonsense?
That's right.
Maybe you'd have to stand back and go, you're right.
It's a good thing to happen, except when you're a professional songwriter or you're professional anything, you learn to kind of soften the
okay.
words. You become
All right.
a little more diplomatic. Why don't we try this way? Well, I like that. Let's keep that, but maybe we can extend this part.
But you're really saying it's terrible. But you're saying it in a more gentle manner.
What you're saying is you don't like it, but you're not saying it stinks. You're the dummy. You have a lot of nerve calling yourself a writer, and all of these things Jesse had no hesitation about saying.
All right. Okay.
So it was a tough time writing.
But it
with
still
him.
led to a song.
It led to this very beautiful, delicate song. All of these battles.
Right. Okay. That's the irony. It's a very gentle, lyrical
Very,
song.
very much so.
So let's hear this very gentle love song that came out of battles. Okay. All right. Neil, we were talking before that song about working with your son. What about working with collaborators? You mentioned Gilbert Becaud at the start and that you love the Everlys, so we can give it a circular tilt in the show. Co-writing with people, I mean, that was very much part of the idea in the Brill Building and beyond. I mean, is that something, on your new album, it's all songs by you, all words and lyrics,
Yes.
words and music by you?
Well, the first 10 years of my recording career, I wrote everything by myself. That's the way I was, that's the way I like writing. This is a very wonderful feeling of accomplishment when you do something and it's beautiful and you're pleased with it and you don't have to ask anybody. And I just loved writing the lyrics and the music by myself. But I felt that I was doing myself a disservice as a recording artist,
Right.
not to be working with other writers as well, not only recording some of their material, but writing, collaborating with them. And so I started, my first collaboration was on the Last Waltz album. And I had a song that I started, and I just couldn't get it finished. I couldn't take it any further than I took it. And so I invited Robbie Robertson in on it. Robbie produced the album, and we wrote it together, and it was fun.
Right.
And I liked it. And I thought, boy, this is a lot easier than going into a room by yourself and beating your head against the wall. You have somebody to talk to. You have somebody to sympathize with, It was more fun. It was easier. And so I started collaborating when I could with people that I respected, with people that I liked and felt I could get along with. And I maybe had a dozen collaborations over the years.
All right.
And wrote some very good songs with collaborators. With Gilbert Becaud, who I loved since the Everlys and since Let It Be Me. We did September Morn,
Right.
was our first song, our first meeting together as writers. We met in his apartment in Paris, and he sat down at the piano, and I played guitar, and there was something he did, and I loved it, and I jumped on it immediately. I said, yes, let's work on that. It was a little melody idea, and it became September Morn. So that was great. I was so happy about that good things could come, and I didn't have to agonize over it myself.
Right. These guys didn't talk back to you. None of them talked back to you until you got to work with Jesse. There's nobody say.
They did talk back to me,
Okay.
but they didn't do it the way Jesse
All right.
did. They,
A little more delicate.
When writers collaborate, they both get their ideas,
Yeah.
and it's usually one person composes the music and one writes the lyrics. But I do both, so I have a tendency to jump on other people
All right.
for melody. I say, let's go here, let's do this, let's try that. Or if they're lyricists, I'll say, let's do this, let's write this, these lines. But when you've done it long enough, and when you've collaborated, work with people that you respect and hold in high regard, there's never any fights. I've never had an argument with a professional writer.
Okay.
It's always done very gently, because they're being honest and they're trying as hard as they can. And just because you don't particularly care for the way the lyric is going or the melody line is going, that doesn't mean you have to kill them. You don't have to step on their heads.
Right.
You can say, well, let's try this. That's nice. And if they really into what they're doing, they will be happy to try it,
Right.
because they want the outcome to be as beautiful as possible. And if you have something to contribute, all the better.
All right. If you turn to a songwriting, a team of composers now, be they Tin Pan Alley composers, Brill Building composers, contemporary composers, where you're feeling kind of depleted of creative energy and you put on someone else's music, do you still listen to maybe Lorenz Hart, Rodgers and Hart, or somebody and go, that's how beautiful it can be. That's what I still should be aspiring towards. Who would you turn to?
I have a book of some of the greatest lyrics of the 20th century, and that's an extraordinary thing to read lyrics naked of the melody, naked of the performance, naked of the orchestrations and all of the goodies that you can put on in a studio. And but some of them are really quite extraordinary. I mean, there are some that are just, terrible, probably from the early years, and the lyrics have grown over the years. They've become poetry, and as lyricists, we've been allowed to write poetry. But I love reading that book and just reading the naked words.
All right. And it's no particular composers that you can endlessly turn to
Great
and
ones, Larry Hart,
Right.
Cole Porter, Alan J. Lerner.
Right.
These are the people that are inspiring, and from a lyric point of view.
Those guys wrote, even the three you've mentioned, wrote very conversational. They had that great ability to blend high poeticism and street language, which I think is another defining feature of your work.
Yes, very much so. I like the lyric to be conversational and not, stick to it shouldn't feel like it's a little rhyme that you wrote up.
Right, right.
It shouldn't feel that way. It should feel like you're expressing an idea, as opposed to following a meter and a rhyming pattern. I Said is one of those where, I really work myself into a box, but I always try to make it feel like it's not a poem, but as it's a conversational way of expressing these ideas. Even though there are lots of rhymes and internal rhymes, and it does follow a meter, it shouldn't sound that way. Somehow it doesn't affect the listener as well if it sounds like you're actually writing to meter.
But it's also, I think, some of the weaker songs are those that try too hard to be poems, and the better ones are those that almost organically become that.
That's possible. Some work and some don't work.
All right, okay. I want to play a couple of tracks from the last album and lead up to a live cut. We did mention earlier, you said that the first track on the new album comes out of the pain of your last divorce.
Yes.
So I kind of brushed by because I wanted to keep it till near the end of the show, but if you don't mind, I would like to play that. So I think you have already described what it's about. So do you want to say anything more about it, or will we just lead into it?
I haven't played this song in years. It's, I think, one of my better lyrics, and probably because it comes from so deep and such a painful experience. I worked on it very, very diligently to make it tell the story that it was supposed to tell. Basically, it's expressing my own pain, and it's not necessarily to be taken literally, line by line, but it was a painful thing to write and a joyful thing to write at the same time.
Okay, we're going to hear it. Okay, Neil, we're leading up to... sorry, hang on. Might as well give the album a title, a plug. There's something I said earlier that I may reshuffle the quote around. So let me. This is just a point I would rather lead towards the end. You say you said in the box set, there's something inside me that is released when I'm able to write music, and I think I'll need that release for as long as I live. Obviously, that relates to the last song we heard and a lot of the stuff on the new album.
Yes, I think the new album is because it was written solely by myself. I made a conscious effort to not work with collaborators because I had done so for years, and I thought, well, maybe it's getting a little too easy, and I'm getting too lazy, and I want the satisfaction of every word to have been mine, and every melody to have been mine. And so I consciously went into this album knowing that I would write the entire thing myself. And it became a very personal album. But not only I haven't played this song in years, but You're the Best Part of Me. I believe in happy endings, which is, the story of my life. I wrote a song for my grandson. A little piece of advice for when I'm long gone that he can listen to, called Elijah's Song, and
right.
Leave a Little Room for God, which the title came from a sign I saw over a recording studio entrance. As the musicians walked into the studio, that sign was there, Leave a Little Room for God.
All right.
And it's so true, and it kind of expresses my own feelings about a deity. You must leave a little room for the spiritual side of yourself.
All right.
Life is more than just the nuts and bolts of getting through each day.
But that's an important factor, and I think it's part of what people in Ireland have hooked into in your music. Apart from loving minor modes and sad songs, I think that element of religious yearning, going back to Holly Holy, going back to Thank the Lord for the Nighttime, right through to the latest album. Yeah. That sense of the deity, be it you are Jewish, a lot of people in Ireland, there are Jewish people in Ireland, but they're Catholics, they're Protestants. It all kind of anybody can relate to that religious aspiration.
Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim, whatever. It's so important to have that other thing that you believe in and can count on.
Would that have helped you through dark periods too, apart from just creating music? A spiritual faith?
Yes, I've always had faith in God. I've always believed in God. For as long as I can remember, my dad had a major heart attack when I was 16, right. And I prayed to God for the first time in my life, please let this man live. I love him so much. Let him live. I'll do whatever it is that satisfies you in your name. And I even promised, I said, I'll cut my hair off. I'll do whatever it is that I have to do. Please grant me this.
Okay.
And he granted me that.
Right.
My father lived for another 15 years, and I was so happy to have him.
Did you also, around 1979, didn't you go through some kind of operation where you wrote goodbye notes and said goodbye to the people you loved, and you were afraid, this is it for me too, I'm going?
Yes. I had very unusual symptoms for a year and a half of losing sensation, first starting at the soles of my feet and working my way up my leg and into my back. And after about a year and a half of having doctors tell me that it was imaginary and it was not important, I went to a very serious doctor, and he said, we're putting you in the hospital and we're going to give you some serious checks. And they gave me a spinal tap and put dye in my spinal cord and tested me and found that I had a monstrous tumor in my spinal column. I looked at the x-ray and there was my spinal cord going down and suddenly like a lemon in there crushing it against
right.
the side of the bone, and which was causing paralysis and an inability to walk and all kinds of physical disabilities. And So he said, we're going to operate immediately. And they got the best neurosurgeon in Los Angeles. It was microsurgery. And it was particularly difficult because it wasn't growing on top of the spinal cord. It was growing from inside the spinal cord. And it was a long and difficult surgery. The doctor, halfway through, called in another surgeon because he didn't want to take responsibility for putting me in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So the two of them worked for about 12 hours and got it out.
Right.
But I didn't know whether I'd live or die or what was going on, really. You don't know. It was in a very delicate place. So I did write my last letters to my kids. It was something that I felt that I had to do. It was a responsibility that I had to all four of them. And, I told them how much I loved them and how important they were to me. And I didn't know what was going to happen with this surgery. I didn't want to die, but it wasn't up to me. And don't be angry if it happens. I want you to go on and live your lives and be productive and, just relish the time that we had together and all the things you want to tell your kids when you think you're going. And, I didn't know. I thought that maybe this would be it. But thankfully and joyfully, they were able to remove it. I still have some symptoms,
Right.
but, I'm able to walk, which is a great joy to me. I would have been happy just to have lived and, even in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. But I'm able to walk and perform and to do all the things that I did before, although I'm in pain a lot. It's never brought me down. It's never gotten me down because here I am. I'm alive.
Okay.
I'm writing music. I've lived to see my kids grow up and have their own children, and there's no greater joy.
I would like to play out of that story because I think I see Elijah's song as kind of a continuation of those notes you wrote.
Yeah, I think it's another extension of me giving them advice and wishing them well and expressing my love.
Okay, so this is for maybe more children than just Neil Diamond's. Okay, last link, last song. You happy with this? We kind of wrapping up? Okay, so I would like to, Neil Diamond, we played their Elijah song. We talked about we've talked throughout the show that the recurrent theme is this aspect of spiritual sustenance in your music for you and for fans and what you like to do with a live show. I mean, one of the songs of yours that has always lifted my spirit, and I know lots of fans, is Brother Love's Travelling Salvation Show. Because again, it captures what you do with the concerts, and you will be doing in Ireland very soon. So does this song still resonate for you, or do you ever listen to it and say, no, I'm tired of some of this early stuff? Or do you listen to yourself and go, still true, still?
Well, I am tired of some of the early stuff,
Right.
and I don't do them anymore
Right.
for that reason. Fortunately, I have a large enough body of work that I can choose things that I want to do. But Brother Love has always resonated with me. I always sing it with full heart and full gusto because I think the message is important. Rise above your pain. Look to the future. Be joyful that you have life. Forgive yourself for not being perfect. Forgive others for not being perfect. Sense the joy of life every day of it. Be loving, maybe more importantly than anything else. Love those around you and all the people that you meet. They deserve it. I love people. I truly love people, and this song is an expression of that love.
All right, Neil Diamond, I thank you very much. It was worth coming all the way to New York to talk to you for an hour or two or whatever it was, and I thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in Ireland.
Joe, thank you so much for coming in. I loved seeing you, and thank you for spending the time. I look forward to playing Dublin. As I tell everybody who asks, When they say, what are your best audiences? I tell them, you go to Ireland, you cannot get a better audience.
Well, you even used us on one of those compilations from the RDS, those famous gigs about a decade ago, where
That's
4 or
right.
5 of the songs had the RDS backing choir.
Absolutely. They are the greatest. I love them.
Because we knew all the songs. That's why I love this.
It's, it's daunting because occasionally I will miss a lyric or forget a lyric, but before I play Ireland, I restudy all my lyrics because I know the audience will be singing along and they will be singing the correct lyrics.
All right.
And I don't want to be caught, with my proverbial pants down.
All right, because someone in the audience would tell you, Neil, you got it wrong there. That's the Irish.
They're singing it, so I better know it.
Well, that's part of the art. It's become our song. So I don't know how much you say you have in the matter anymore.
I have no say. I'm just one of the group.
Okay. Neil Diamond, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Joe.
That was great. That was good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right. That was worth it.
That was a good
No,
rehearsal. Can we take it?
Let's take it. Let's put it on tape.
Okay.
That was brilliant.
That was good stuff.
Good.
Well, I thank you for answering the questions about your private life so honestly, because I know that's not an area, and I didn't want to go into specifics.
It's part of the music. And
It is part of the music.
It's
Yeah.
fair game.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we say.
But we didn't hurt anybody. We didn't hurt anyone talking
That's
about
the key.
it.
Yeah, that is the key. That, as I say, it's an honest. That we're not.
Aren't they great?
Ah.
And the quality of them is so. I mean, they go to A3 size blow-ups, and you're kind of going for something that small.
Yes.
And if you don't like it, if you don't look good, you can just say scrap it and do it again.
Exactly. I don't know how Kodak stays in business. I know Polaroid is out of business.
All right, okay. We've got quite an audience in there.
Yeah, the flash
That's
didn't
enough,
go
that's
off,
not-
and
you
you're
can
gonna
press
want.
it really. You don't have to look in that end. You can look in the try again. Look
Yeah.
through this. Look through it as a regular camera. Forget this.
All right.
The gimmick always gets it. Try again. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Would you mind taking one with me, Joe?
No problem.
Well, we might break. We might test the camera here. I don't know.
I forgot to thank you. And last time back in Phoenix Park, or where was it? Crook Park, there was
Yeah.
a shot taken of you and I, and it's a private place in my mum's home.
Hi, Joe Jackson here again. I thank you for listening to this edition of the Joe Jackson Interviews podcast. And don't forget, if you want to read any of the articles I wrote about Neil Diamond and countless other celebrities, check out my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com. And if you like, subscribe to either my podcast on any podcast server or the visualized version on YouTube.